was a quiet afternoon at the Silver Oak Estate, a beautiful mansion owned by the wealthy businessman Mr. Douglas Carrington. His name was known all over town. He made millions in the oil industry, owned houses across the world, and had everything money could buy. But inside his big, cold mansion, the people who worked for him whispered about one thing more than anything else: his daughter Emma. Emma was just 6 years old, with soft brown hair and big eyes that always looked sad, like she was thinking about something she couldn't explain. She rarely spoke, never smiled, and often sat alone even when surrounded by people. The chef of the house, Mr. Harold, had worked in that kitchen for over 20 years. He cooked for presidents, royals, and even celebrities. But there was something about this little girl that made him uneasy. Emma came to the dining room every day like clockwork. She sat at the same table, her pink dress always perfectly ironed, her hair tied in 2 small braids. But every day, no matter what food Harold made, chicken soup, mashed potatoes, grilled salmon, or warm apple pie, she barely touched her plate. She would stir the food with her spoon, nibble a small bite, then leave the rest untouched. At first, Harold thought she was just picky, as many kids are. He tried to make fun shapes out of the food, added smiling faces with ketchup, or made alphabet soup to entertain her. Still, nothing worked. She just sat there, silent, always looking down. One day, while clearing her bowl, he noticed something odd. The leftover letters in the alphabet soup on her plate were not random like usual. They were arranged carefully, and they spelled something. It was only one word, but it made him stop for a moment and oh. He blinked and laughed it off. Must be a coincidence, he said to himself. But the next day, he made alphabet soup again to see if she'd do it again. She barely ate, as usual, and when she left, he checked the bowl. The letters were pushed to the side this time, clearly arranged again. This time the word was trap. Harold felt a chill go down his spine. Was she trying to say something? Was she playing a game? Was it just nonsense from a little girl with a vivid imagination? He couldn't be sure. He decided not to tell anyone. Instead, he kept watching. For a whole week, he made alphabet soup every day. And each day, Emma left behind a single word: hurt, help, room, pain. Each one chilled him more than the last. These weren't random. These were messages, and they were coming from a child who had never said a word to him. One afternoon, he tried to speak to her gently. "Emma," he said, kneeling beside her as she sat with her soup. "Are you okay? Do you want to talk to me?" She looked at him with those deep, quiet eyes. For a moment, he thought she was going to say something. Her lips moved slightly, but then she looked away and started stirring her soup again. That evening, Harold couldn't sleep. His mind kept going back to those words. What did they mean? Was someone hurting her? Was she in danger? It didn't make sense. She was the daughter of a millionaire. She had nannies, tutors, doctors, everything. But the words in her soup haunted him. What if nobody else noticed? What if she was crying for help in the only way she could? Harold made a choice. He decided to keep watching closely. He started writing down the words she left behind each day. He even saved the leftover soup quietly, storing pictures of the letters with his phone. He didn't know who to trust. He couldn't go to Mr. Carrington without proof. What if he was part of the problem? What if someone in the house was hurting her, and telling anyone would make things worse for Emma? One rainy morning, she left behind a new message: basement. That word hit Harold like a punch in the chest. There was a basement in the house, but it was locked all the time. Only Mr. Carrington and one of the guards had the keys. Nobody went down there. Rumors among the staff said it was filled with old furniture or business files. But now Harold wasn't so sure. Why would Emma write that? He knew he had to find out what was down there. But he also knew that sneaking into the basement of a millionaire's mansion could get him fired, or worse. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about that sad little girl and the messages in her soup. Something was very wrong, and he was the only one who seemed to notice. The next morning, Harold arrived at the mansion kitchen before the sun came up. He washed his hands slowly, staring at the floor while the water ran over his fingers. His heart was heavy. He could not stop thinking about Emma. That word she had left behind in the soup, basement, was now stuck in his head like a whisper he couldn't silence. He felt like time was running out. Something bad might already be happening, and every day that passed could be another day that Emma suffered. But what could he do? He wasn't a detective. He was just a chef. Still, he had worked in this house long enough to know his way around. Maybe he didn't have the keys, but he had ideas. That day, he made breakfast for everyone like normal. Toast, eggs, sausage, coffee. The house staff walked in and out, chatting and laughing. The butler, Mr. Sloane, told his usual bad jokes. Everything seemed normal, as always. But Harold's eyes kept drifting to Emma, who sat quietly at the long table in her usual seat. She was playing with her food again, barely eating. The other staff thought she was just a shy, spoiled girl. They didn't see the things Harold saw. When she looked up at him, their eyes met for a moment. It was the first time she had ever really looked at him like that. It was as if she was saying something with her eyes. She blinked slowly, then looked back down at her plate. When she stood up to leave, Harold waited a moment, then quickly moved to check her soup. This time, the word she left behind was key. That was it. He had to act. That evening, after the rest of the staff had left and the house was quiet, Harold snuck down the hallway toward the study. That's where Mr. Carrington kept a large wooden desk filled with files, keys, and other private things. Harold had seen him open the desk many times, but never knew where the basement key was kept. He didn't have long. If someone caught him snooping, it would be over. His hands shook as he opened the desk drawer. Pens, old papers, envelopes. Then, under a book, he saw it. A single silver key with a small label taped to it. Storage B. His heart jumped. B could stand for basement. Harold grabbed it and walked quickly, but quietly, down to the end of the hallway. The door to the basement was always locked. The housekeepers never talked about it. Now, standing in front of it with the key in his hand, Harold took a deep breath. He turned the key. It clicked. The door opened with a creak. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. It smelled damp, like dust and old things that hadn't been touched in years. Harold pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. Step by step, he walked down. The air grew colder with each step. As he reached the bottom, he saw a long hallway with old furniture stacked on the sides, chairs, broken shelves, dusty paintings. But then he heard something. A faint noise, like a cough or a cry. "Hello," Harold whispered, his voice shaky. No answer. He walked deeper into the basement. At the far end, he saw a metal door. It looked newer than everything else around it. There was a keypad next to it. He tried the handle. Locked. He stared at the keypad. He had no idea what the code was. He looked around the basement walls, hoping for clues, but found nothing. He didn't want to leave. He felt like Emma was trying to lead him here. But without the code, he was stuck. The next day, he served Emma soup again. This time he didn't speak. He simply watched. When she finished and left, he rushed to the table. The word in the soup was code. He stood still, thinking hard. She knew he found the door. She was trying to give him the next step. She was helping him, in her own quiet way. For the next few days, Harold gave her alphabet soup again and again. Each day, she left a few letters. It was like she was spelling the code out, one message at a time. First came 1, then 9, then 7, then 2. He wrote them down carefully. Finally, after a week, he had the full code, 1972. He didn't know what it meant. Maybe it was the year Mr. Carrington was born, or maybe it was random. Either way, Harold was ready. He waited for the right time, when the staff was gone and Mr. Carrington had left the estate for a meeting in town. He walked down into the basement again, phone light in hand, and reached the keypad. He took a breath, then typed the numbers, 1, 9, 7, 2. The light on the keypad turned green. The door clicked. Harold pushed it open slowly. What he saw inside would change everything. The heavy metal door creaked open slowly, and Harold stepped inside. The air smelled strange, like bleach, metal, and something else he couldn't name. His heart was pounding as he held his phone up to light the room. It wasn't what he expected. There were no storage boxes or furniture here. The room was clean, almost too clean. The walls were white. The floor was tiled. There was a hospital-style bed in the middle of the room. Machines beeped quietly in the corners. A small table stood nearby with a tray of untouched food and an old teddy bear. Harold's footsteps echoed as he walked further in. He whispered, "Hello," but again no answer. Then he heard something movement, a soft rustling sound behind a curtain at the far end of the room. His stomach turned as he slowly walked toward it. With one hand, he pulled back the curtain. What he saw made him freeze. There was a little girl sitting on the floor. She was wearing clothes that looked just like Emma's, but they were dirty and wrinkled. Her hair was messy, her face pale. She looked up at him with big, scared eyes, and he saw it right away. This was Emma. But how could that be? Emma had been upstairs every day, sitting at the table, quiet but clean and calm. But this girl looked weak, like she hadn't seen the sun in weeks. She opened her mouth and whispered, "Help me." Harold knelt beside her. "Emma, is that you? But how?" She nodded slowly. "Please help." Then a terrible realization hit him. If this was Emma, the real Emma, then who was the girl upstairs? Harold helped her to her feet. She was shaking. Her legs were thin, and she leaned on him for support. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm going to get you out of here." But he needed to move fast. Someone had put her here on purpose. Someone had been keeping her locked away in this hidden basement room, while another girl, who looked just like her, sat upstairs in her place. But why? What were they hiding? He helped Emma up the stairs, one careful step at a time. When they got to the basement door, he peeked out into the hallway. The house was quiet, but his hands were shaking. He didn't know how much time they had. He led Emma down a back hallway and into the kitchen. She was too weak to walk far, so he let her sit in the pantry while he got water and a small piece of bread. She drank slowly, and a bit of color came back into her cheeks. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly. She looked scared, but she whispered, "My father and the nurse. They said I was too sick, but I wasn't. They didn't want me to talk." Harold's blood ran cold. He didn't understand it fully, but it was clear. Mr. Carrington had hidden his daughter away. Maybe she had seen or heard something she wasn't supposed to. Maybe she had a secret, but instead of helping her, he replaced her with another girl who looked similar enough to fool everyone else. It was cruel. It was wrong. And Harold couldn't stay quiet any longer. He called someone he trusted more than anyone, his niece, Anna, who worked as a social worker in the city. She always said if he ever saw something wrong in the homes he worked in, to let her know. "No questions," she told him. "Just call me." Now, with shaking fingers, he called her and explained everything. At first, she didn't believe it. "Harold, are you serious? That's kidnapping. That's illegal." "I know," he said, his voice low. "But I'm looking at the real girl, the one who's been missing, and there's a fake one upstairs." "I'm coming," she said. Harold stayed close to Emma, locking the pantry from the inside just in case. Every noise in the house made his heart jump. Finally, after what felt like forever, he heard the back door open. It was Anna, and she wasn't alone. She had brought 2 officers with her. Harold opened the pantry, and Emma looked at the strangers with fear, but he gently said, "They're here to help. It's okay." The officers took Emma gently into their care. They called for medical help. Anna stayed with Harold and held his hand as he explained everything. She told the police about the messages in the soup, the hidden room, the girl who looked just like Emma but wasn't. The officers took photos, collected evidence, and promised to investigate. And just as they were about to leave, one of the officers asked, "Where's the other girl? The one pretending to be Emma?" Harold froze. She should be upstairs. But when they went to look, the room was empty. The fake Emma was gone. Disappeared. The room was empty. The girl pretending to be Emma had vanished without a trace. The officers searched every corner of the mansion, her bedroom, the guest rooms, even the garden, but she was nowhere to be found. Her clothes were still in the closet, her shoes still neatly lined up under the bed, but the girl herself had disappeared like smoke in the wind. One officer looked at Harold and said, "She didn't just run away on her own. Someone took her." Harold felt the walls closing in. "Mr. Carrington," he said, "he left this morning for a meeting. What if he knew we were close to the truth? What if he took her?" Anna looked stunned. You think he was behind all this? That he replaced his own daughter and locked the real one in the basement? Harold nodded slowly. She told me. Emma said her father and the nurse didn't want her to talk. That she wasn't really sick. They just said she was. Maybe she found out something. Maybe she heard something she wasn't supposed to. It was a theory, but it made a lot of sense. Mr. Carrington was rich, powerful, and careful about his image. He was also known for making shady deals behind the scenes. If his daughter had seen or heard something that could destroy him, maybe he thought hiding her away was the easiest solution. But even that didn't explain everything. Who was the other girl? Where had she come from? Was she part of the plan? Or just a victim too? Back at the kitchen, Emma sat wrapped in a blanket with warm tea in her hand. The paramedics had come and checked her. She was tired and a little weak, but okay. When she saw Harold again, she whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time she'd spoken more than one word at once. Harold smiled gently. "You're safe now. I promise." The police put out an alert for the fake Emma and for Mr. Carrington. It made the news quickly. Millionaire's daughter found locked in basement. Reporters came to the front gates of the estate, but nobody had answers. People were shocked. Everyone thought Mr. Carrington was a good man, a generous donor to schools and charities. Nobody could believe what he had done to his own daughter. Then a break came. A traffic camera caught a black car matching Carrington's driving toward the airport just 2 hours before the police arrived. When they checked the private jet records, they found he had boarded with a young relative listed as his guest. No doubt, the fake Emma. The plane had landed in a small country with no extradition treaty. He was gone. The investigation didn't stop, though. With Anna's help, Emma was placed under special care with security and a medical team. She began to speak more. Slowly, she opened up about what happened. She said that months ago, she had walked into her father's office late at night and saw something on his computer. She didn't understand it, but it looked like people getting hurt and large amounts of money moving between fake names. When she asked questions, her father told her she had imagined it. The next morning, she was taken to a doctor, told she was sick, and given medicine that made her sleepy and confused. Then came the nurse, then the room, then the basement. Emma never knew who the other girl was. She remembered seeing her once, through a crack in the door, before she was taken away. The girl looked just like her, but quieter. She looked scared too. Emma said softly. Maybe they told her to pretend, or they would hurt her too. Harold sat with Emma almost every day after that. They talked about food, and sometimes he brought her soup, but no alphabet letters this time. Just warm, simple soup that made her feel safe. Weeks passed. The world moved on, but the story stayed alive online. Some called Harold a hero. Others asked how something like this could go unnoticed for so long. But Emma was healing. Slowly but surely. Her voice grew stronger, and one day, she even laughed. A small giggle that made Harold smile wider than he had in years. Mr. Carrington was never found. He vanished with the fake Emma, and nobody knew what became of them. The authorities believed he had planned it for months, maybe years, creating fake identities and exit plans in case things ever fell apart. What he didn't plan on, though, was a quiet chef paying attention to a little girl's leftover soup. In time, Emma was given a new home. She stayed with Anna's family for a while, and Harold visited often. One day, she drew a picture of him, wearing his chef hat, holding a big spoon, and she wrote in shaky letters, "Thank you for reading my soup." It was simple, but it said everything. Harold kept the picture in a frame above his kitchen stove, and every time he stirred a new pot of soup, he smiled and remembered the day a bowl of letters changed everything.